This story, it starts on a busy city street, but its roots, well, they go way, way back to a wound that never really healed.
You know, there's this idea that some wounds don't work like others. They don't bleed, they don't scab over and turn into a scar. They just stay open. A quiet, constant ache that can end up shaping your entire life. So let me tell you about a man named Jim. For him, that wound opened up when his mother just disappeared from his life. He was only 8 years old.
Picture it. At 8 years old, he hears his mother's voice for the very last time. No goodbye, no explanation. His entire childhood becomes an exercise in living with questions that have no answers. So, as an adult, faith, that feels like some distant theory, something for other people. And then, one day, completely out of the blue, the past shows up on a little slip of paper, his mother's phone number.
I mean, you can almost feel the weight of that, can't you? That number, just sitting in his pocket, feeling heavier and heavier with every single day that passed. It wasn't just a bunch of digits. It was a choice. A door he really wasn't sure he ever wanted to open.
To protect himself, to somehow manage this wound he carried for decades, Jim had built a wall around his heart. He had a very, very firm condition. An ultimatum he'd probably rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times over the years.
And this was it, simple and clear. If she wants to talk to me, she should be the one to call me. And if she does, she owes me an apology. See? The ball was entirely in her court. It was his only defense against being hurt all over again.
And that brings us to that afternoon, on that busy city street, where this private condition he'd lived by for so long was about to become a very public, very real challenge. He's walking with a Christian acquaintance, and he just lays it all out on the table. He says, if God is real, let him make my mom call me and apologize. If that happens, I'll believe. And you have to understand, this wasn't him being sarcastic. This wasn't a joke. It was the sound of pure exhaustion. It was a desperate cry from a place of deep, settled doubt.
So what does the acquaintance do? His response is immediate, and it's the last thing Jim expected. No debate, no argument, just a simple request.
Right there, in the middle of all the traffic noise, with strangers just walking by, the man starts to pray. The setting could not have been more ordinary, but the request he made, it was anything but.
And just listen to the sheer audacity of this prayer. He says, God, I thank you that you will have his mom call him before I say amen to apologize. Did you catch that? Before he says amen, he put an impossible deadline on a miracle. So what happens next is the very definition of an immediate answer. It's that one moment where a lifetime of doubt and a single moment of faith just hang in the balance.
He says, Amen. And for a split second, there's just silence, just the sounds of the city. And then, Jim freezes. He pulls out his phone, and the screen is lit up with a single, impossible word. Mom.
He answers the call. He has to. And the very first words he hears, after decades of silence, are a direct fulfillment of his condition. Hello, baby. I'm so sorry.
What happened next was just staggering. First, Jim hangs up the phone, totally overwhelmed. Then, his knees just give out and hit the pavement, right there on the sidewalk. And finally, a new name comes out of his mouth. Jesus, you're real. But believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. As incredible as that moment was, a second, maybe even more profound miracle was about to be revealed. A much deeper revelation was on its way. Jim calls his mother back. He tells her, I just gave my life to Jesus. And her response is absolutely stunning. She says, baby, I met Jesus 4 days ago. This wasn't just about one heart being changed, it was about two, moving in parallel, orchestrated by something so much bigger than either of them.
So let's just break this down. The miracle wasn't just that she called. It was when she called, in the seconds right after that prayer. It was what she said, the exact apology he had demanded. And most importantly, it was who God revealed himself to be. Personal, attentive, and intimately aware of the deepest wounds of a human heart.
For Jim, faith didn't arrive as a theory that day. It wasn't an argument he was finally convinced by. No, it arrived as a voice, unmistakable and real.
What started as a rigid condition for belief, a test, an ultimatum, it became an open invitation to a relationship. The wall he had spent a lifetime building just crumbled in an instant.
And it leaves us with this powerful question to think about.
What happens when the pain that has defined a life finally stops talking and something else gets a chance to speak?
The Renewal Project exists to preserve stories like this, not to persuade, but to remember, not to pressure, but to reflect.
If this story stirred something in you, just let it sit with you for a while. Faith often begins not with a flood of answers, but with a quiet willingness to simply hear. Like and follow for more.